Hey friends, I'm here with Matthew chapter 4 today. Chapter 4 kind of makes a break from last chapter where he was talking about John the Baptist, and it brings it right back to Jesus. And Jesus, it says that the Holy Spirit leads him out to the desert to be tempted by Satan. And I don't know exactly why the Holy Spirit brought Jesus out to the desert, except for to be tempted by Satan. But I think it had something to do with the fact that this was the beginning of his ministry. And when you start a ministry, it's something that you should enter into prayerfully and with a connection with God, because if you go into a ministry situation and you are doing all things through the power of God and through the Holy Spirit, you know, you better make sure that you're doing it by the Holy Spirit and not by your own power. It's different because Jesus is God, but he's also a perfect example of what we're supposed to be like, and he needed to be connected to the Holy Spirit and to God. This is, you know, God the Father. This is something that we all need to do. I partially think that connecting with the rest of the Trinity must have been really glorious for Jesus. And I think it could be glorious for us if we did it more often. I went to seminary for a spell, and I had to take a class called Spiritual Formation. And in this class, we had to do different spiritual disciplines. We had to try fasting, and I think that's a pretty common one. We had to do journaling, but then we had to do something called silence and solitude, and we could do those at the same time, but they're technically two different disciplines. And so for an entire day, I had to go out away from anybody or anything, away from my phone and computer, and I just sat in the wilderness. The wilderness makes it sound like it's more extreme. You know, I went to a metro park in the area, but a place that nobody else would see me, and I just stayed there under a tree in, you know, the woods all day. You know, I walked around a little bit, took a little nap, but I tell you what, it was hard being by yourself and you know, communicating with God. It really shows you how difficult it is to be with yourself. And Jesus did it for 40 days. I feel like most people highlight the fasting, but being alone for 40 days, that is really difficult. So Jesus does that, and at the end it says he was hungry. Kind of an interesting understatement. Of course he was hungry. He hadn't eaten in 40 days. But that's when the devil came out and tempted him. And he tempted him with three things. He said, you know, you can turn this stone into bread. I think this is interesting because there's nothing wrong with that. If Jesus wanted to turn the stone into bread, he could do that. I think it's funny that he asked, because, you know, he went out in the wilderness to fast, and he's like, you know what your problem is? You need some bread. You could turn this stone into bread. And it's like, yeah, I could also go into the town and buy some food. I don't need to turn a stone into bread. But that's what he does. He says, you know, you could turn this stone into bread. And he answers them and he says, man does not feed on bread alone, but by every word from the mouth of God. And then he says, well, why don't you jump off this cliff here? Because the angels will save you, because, you know, the prophecy says that it will keep your foot dashed from a stone. And he says, you know, you're not supposed to put the Lord to the test. And then he brings him up on a tall mountain. He says, I will give all of this to you if you bow down and worship me. But he's tempted by Satan. He goes through an interesting part about Jesus's temptation in the desert is that it parallels the 40 years that the Israelites spent in the desert. They were in 40 years and he was in the desert for 40 days. And that was right before they started, you know, their kingdom. And this is right before Jesus is starting his ministry. And, you know, it's a time of proving it. It's something that is good. And I feel like if you're in a time in your life where you feel like I'm not doing anything, I'm wandering in a desert, you know, it might be that God's preparing you for something, and this is just the way that God decided to do it. I know that I've had to deal with that a lot in my life, and I feel like sometimes those times that seem very dry are some of the times that I've had the richest relationship with God ever. So Jesus starts his ministry, and it says he picks two brothers. It says he picks James and John and Simon Peter, which is one person, Simon Peter and Andrew. And then it says he starts going around all of Galilee, and he starts healing people, and he starts casting out demons. And it says that people start following him from all over, from the other side of the Jordan River. From, you know, he's in Galilee, but people are coming from everywhere to see him do miracles and to hear him speak. And so this is the beginning of the ministry. And so we're still in the beginning here. I hope you'll keep watching. Next week will be the Sermon on the Mount. So, all right, see you tomorrow.